Our first speaker tonight is a student who is really involved in her school, but she's also a wish granter through the Make-A-Wish Foundation. God's love worked through those around her, and God's love has changed her life. Let's give it up for Caroline Meeker.
Fat. A tiny word, right? Fat. A word that could mean nothing to one person meant everything to me. A word that flipped a switch in my brain that will never turn off. I was a typical 9-year-old. I loved school, my friends, and sports. On the outside, I looked happy, but inside, I was anxious, a perfectionist, a strict rule follower, and very much a people pleaser. I tried hiding this part of me, but that all changed the day a girl called me fat. Until that day, I never once questioned my body image, and I certainly never thought of myself as fat. That one word not only changed how I saw myself, it changed my entire life. Self-worth grew to be my biggest challenge. I couldn't accept my body for the way it was. I couldn't love myself for who I was. The need to be thin, to be perfect, to look exactly like the models in magazines became an obsession. I was so fixed on these ideas that I was no longer me anymore. I had become my eating disorder. It consumed every aspect of my daily life, weighing myself several times a day, reading food labels to check the grams of fat and calories, constantly pinching my stomach to look for fat so often that my skin became red and raw. Exercising excessively, not allowing myself to sleep until I had burned off enough calories. I wouldn't even swallow my own saliva because I was convinced that it too made me gain weight. These behaviors and my anxiety were debilitating. The fear was constant. I was angry with God. I wanted to know why I was like this and where He was in all of this. One day, the school nurse examined me and noticed I had lost more weight. That was the day I was admitted to inpatient care. I was immediately taken from my parents and confined to a wheelchair. I was at risk of burning any calories just by being on my feet. They officially diagnosed me with anorexia. I remember waiting for visiting hours that only came around once a day from 7 to 9 p.m. Those short hours were usually filled with me crying hysterically, begging my parents to take me home. I still didn't understand why I was there. After saying our goodbyes, it was a shower and then off to bed as the night staff monitored me through every step of that routine, making sure I wouldn't exercise as I so often did. So with no fat left, a layer of baby hair grew all over my body to keep me warm. My skin was turning yellow, which meant my organs were shutting down. I was struggling too hard. I couldn't stop this voice in my head that was telling me not to eat. I was literally disappearing, both mentally and physically. My brain was so malnourished that I was having all sorts of illogical thoughts. I had bouts of screaming and crying, all about how I absolutely hated to eat. I blamed my parents, telling them that I hated them, how I wanted to die. It would just be so much easier. Giving me a feeding tube was the only option left if I wanted to live. I knew this was a possibility, but I never thought it would actually happen. It was the scariest and most painful thing that had happened to me. I had to eat all of my meals for 5 consecutive days for the tube to be removed. I followed these orders, and the tube came out. But the feeding tube was my incentive to eat, and now it was gone. There was no longer any motivation for me to get better. More time went on with still no sign of progress, so my doctors changed my recovery plan. I was told I wouldn't be starting school later that month. I would no longer be a normal kid, getting to start a new year of school like the rest of my friends. I thought I had lost everything. The new restrictions that were placed upon me brought me back to reality. I started to notice things other than my eating disorder again. Things like my parents' expressions every visit, their teary eyes and pretend smiles, trying to hide the pain I was putting them through. They didn't even know how to comfort their own daughter anymore. I wish I could tell you the exact moment when I decided to really fight. But I was only 9. I was only 9. So I can't tell you exactly why or how or when I started to get better. But I can tell you who. God was there. God was there through my doctors. God was there through my family. God was there through prayer from my church and friends. God was everywhere. God's love and presence gave my parents the hope and strength to continue to fight for me through this disease. Over the next several years, I continued to fight and recover. Somewhere along the way, eating became less scary, swallowing was no longer a battle, the eating disorder voice in my head softened, and what I saw on the scale became just a dumb number. Eventually, I learned that God doesn't give us hardships. He doesn't decide the time or place something unfortunate will happen. Instead, God promises to be there. God promises to put the right people in our lives. He promises to put the right people in our lives to help us, to give us strength, and to love us always. 10 years ago, to this day, my feeding tube was placed. I was in the deepest fight of my life. But with God's hope and constant love, I was able to fight and ultimately overcome my eating disorder. Eating disorders are a disease. They are not a choice. They are not a phase or fad. My eating disorder will always be a part of me. So yes, there are still hard days, but I need to be kind to myself, believing that my reflection isn't the only thing that defines me. If you're struggling, know that there is help and believe there is hope. My hope is that you all love yourselves the way God loves you. Thank you.